Hello, tonight I bring you two terrifying tales that share one scary undead universe. Healthcare Hazzards and 30 Minutes or Flesh. Over the last year, I had finally achieved one of my main dreams in life and moved to California. I hail from a little shithole town in Georgia. It took me quite some time to scrape together the cash I needed to escape hillbilly hell. Although knowing what I know now, I would have never made this move. My name's Cyrus, and this is my nightmare. So after uprooting everything and finally moving to the Golden State, I had a bit of a rough time finding work. I was starting to get really nervous that I was going to have to pack it all up and head back home. After moving expenses and everything was done and said, I only had enough money to survive 2 months max without work. Eventually I lucked out and did find employment through a hospital. I would be working overnights. During training, a couple of my fellow employees called it the graveyard shift. The job was simple. I was to report to work every night at 10 p.m. After punching in, I would head to the employee quarters. From there, I would collect my clipboard and my company cell phone, and then all I had to do was wait for the phone to ring. So you're probably wondering what exactly the job I'm performing is. I'm a transporter of sorts. My cargo? Corpses. Whenever someone dies in the hospital, it's my job to go and collect the body. It's not terrible, and dead things never really bothered me. I think the worst thing about the job is when bodies kinda move on their own. I've gone on Reddit and made sure that I'm not crazy. This does happen sometimes. The movement's usually minor. For example, I'll get the box that I moved the cadavers in downstairs and their legs will be crossed. Or there's been a few times as I'm sliding them into the metal slabs for the freezer door of the morgue, and I'll turn around to do something, and when I come back, one of their arms is hanging out from underneath the cloth. The internet claims this is muscle memory. I claim it's creepy as shit. I think the worst thing that ever happened with this kind of situation was the time one sat up on me. It was an elderly gentleman who had passed. I got my routine phone call and I went to pick him up. It happened right as I walked into the room. So usual protocol for when someone dies is when the family has left, you pull a sheet over them. So in case somebody enters their room, that's the universal sign for this patient is no longer with us. As I entered the room, the body was in an upright position. The sheet was still covering it, but you could tell it was sitting up. So the general rule of thumb is when I'm going to pick up a body, they lay the body flat, that way I can slide it over from the bed right into my metal box. Although a tad awkward, the process is usually quick and painless. Seeing the body like that caught me off guard. So I went out to the hallway and grabbed the nurse who had been taking care of that room. I awkwardly asked her to confirm the name and birth date of the deceased patient. She seemed rather confused as we had just been through this a few minutes before I'd entered the room. I then proceeded to explain to her what I walked in on. She looked rather concerned when I explained I had found the body in an upright sitting position. The nurse quickly stepped around me and entered the room. I followed her into the room. I was met with a sour gaze and her hands were on her hips. She asked me in a frustrated voice if I was some kind of funny guy. She then proceeded to ask who had put me up to this sick joke. I was confused at first, but then I looked at the bed where the patient had been sitting. The corpse was now laying flat, the way all bodies are when I come to pick them up. The nurse gave me a scowl as she walked out of the room and mentioned that I was twisted. I wanted to protest, but at this point it didn't matter. The only other thing that really freaks me out about my job is when the corpses moan. Let me explain though, because I know what it sounds like. Sometimes when someone dies, they have air trapped in their lungs. And when you move the body right or pressure is applied to the body in a certain way, the air will escape the lungs and it comes out in a moaning sound. Luckily, on-the-job training explains this, because if I had moved somebody and they moaned after I knew they were dead, I think I would have shit myself. So it used to be on a standard shift for my job, I would move 1, maybe 2 bodies max a night. Ever since this new virus came out though, I'm moving 5 to 6 bodies a night, sometimes 7 on the weekends. Now those numbers are quite alarming as California is a big state, but it's not only the number of bodies I'm moving, but the age of the deceased. Now, majority of the time, the deceased I move are usually elderly, and when they're not elderly, it's only because they usually were in a car accident or something very fatal. Lately, I've been moving a lot of people my age, and it kind of really messes me up, I'm not gonna lie. The virus that's afflicting the population originated overseas. The protocol at my job had changed after this virus was discovered. So lately, work has me take extra precaution while moving those who have been done in by the virus. So usually when I pick up a body, I take it down to the morgue. I place it in the freezer, where it waits for the mortician to show up to do the autopsy. But ever since the virus had launched, my orders have changed. We no longer hold the bodies in the morgue. After someone passes, a nurse makes a special phone call to a company, at which point I get a phone call next, I pick up the deceased in my metal box and I wheel them down to the doors of the shipping and receiving dock. At which point I'm met by somebody wearing a hazmat suit. They hand me a clipboard to fill out while they take my metal box into the back of a refrigerated truck. The company's name is ZECTech. What it stands for, I don't know. All I can tell you is the company spells its name as ZECK. I've googled it and all it comes up with is links to other sites about corporate cleanup. The whole situation's weird, but it's none of my business. And seeing as I have rent to pay, I'm not questioning it. It's been about a month now since this virus hit. Before my nights were riddled with body transfers. I used to spend a lot of my free time on Reddit. I enjoy the occasional conspiracy theory, as well as Reddit has a lot of information you won't find in other places. Tonight, work happened to start off slow. So while scrolling down my main page, I happened upon a thread that was picking up a lot of speed. The title of the thread was "The Dead Shall Walk." I invested some time in reading it. The original poster had claimed that a family member of his who was under quarantine who had symptoms of the virus had passed away. After saying their goodbyes, they had closed off the family member's room, where at that point they had waited for the coroner to arrive. When opening the door for the coroner to collect the body, they were met with the surprising factor that the family member was up and about. At that point, the coroner had panicked and urged the family to leave the room immediately. The original poster didn't see much, just that their grandmother had been standing and looking out the window. They only caught a glimpse of her as they were rushed out of the room by the panicked family members. Other users began to comment on the thread, saying that they had heard or seen similar things. What the community had come to as a whole was that those who would die by the virus do not stay dead. Now this left me feeling a bit uneasy, but it made me start to really wonder if there was something to this. Ever since people started dying from this virus, we haven't been storing the bodies here. Not to mention, they're out of here within an hour of their death. Now, the original poster never posted a time limit as to how long it would take for a corpse to reanimate. According to different users in the comments section, it's anywhere from 2 to 4 hours. It was about an hour into my shift when my phone finally rang. As usual, I gathered up my belongings, I put on a fresh pair of gloves, and I grabbed the handles of the big metal box and rolled out. I arrived upstairs to pick up my passenger, and the halls were empty. All the nurses, CNAs, and other workers were all gathered around the main nursing station. They were all watching a news report on a computer screen. I myself was never one for the news. Maybe you can blame it on my age. Majority of the time, though, they report the same 6 stupid things in different orders, and they're just like, "If you're just joining us back now, thanks for the update, Chuck. Back to you. More at 11. It all just comes off as stupid rubbish to me. I announced that I was here to pick up said room and asked for the nurse to step forward. She broke away from the crowd, but she never turned her neck towards me. Her gaze was always focused on that computer screen. I muttered under my breath, "Geez, if I didn't know any better, I'd be standing in a room full of zombies." The nurse signed my clipboard and then slowly walked back to the group. I then turned around, grasped my box, put one of my hands up and said "have a good night" with a nonchalant wave. I headed into the room. I did the slide by myself and put the patient in the box. This was a depressing night. The girl I was picking up was around my age and was extremely beautiful. It was marked down in her paperwork that she was suffering from virus symptoms. I stopped for a moment and thought about all the things in life she'd never get to do, and I promised myself I'd start living just a little more. After I got her loaded up, I sealed the box and I headed out. I then followed due protocol and I headed towards the doors of the shipping and receiving docks. Oddly though, once I had arrived, no one was there to greet me. For the last month, ever since I've picked up a corpse, there's always been someone to meet me right at the door. I phoned the floor and asked to speak to the nurse who had signed the paperwork for me. She told me she had followed through on her end, and she'd even called ZECTech before I got there. This was really unlike ZECTech. They were really on point about this, so for them not to be here was kinda concerning. With no options left, I decided to phone my boss. He told me he would look into it in the morning when he came in, but for now just place the body in the morgue freezer. To be safe, I waited 5 more minutes, just in case ZECTech was running behind. You know, they could have had a busy night. Time passed, and no one showed up, so I took the body back to the freezer like my boss had told me. Once I arrived back in the morgue, I set up the paperwork and I started filing it away. Anytime someone's placed in the freezer, you gotta do paperwork. I began to zone out as I started the filing process, when suddenly, a loud thud had broken me out of my trance. Nothing in the room looked any different, but I decided to go and check on my metal box I had stored the cadaver in. I slowly and hesitantly opened the lid of the box. I think I was imagining things because the body had moved. When I placed her in the box, I put her on her back. Upon opening the box, she was laying on her side. Call it muscle memory maybe, but this is the weirdest case I've ever seen. I decided right then and there I was going to load her in the freezer because I was notably freaked out. After getting her on ice and finishing my paperwork, I had sat down at my computer. I was getting ready to scroll Reddit when all of a sudden the power flickered in the hospital. A few minutes went by and it flickered again, but this time it had gone out. Lucky for us, the hospital has emergency generators, but they only power the most essential things. Sadly, the morgue in my office aren't one of them. Right after the power outage, the PA system started its loud chirp letting us know a message was going to be played throughout the entire hospital. Attention all staff, I repeat, attention all staff, this is not a drill, code purple. I ended up having to check my badge because I wasn't really familiar with the codes as we never really dealt with anything important at night. Code purple, threat inside the hospital, find cover. What the hell was going on? I pulled out my phone and was getting ready to scroll the news media looking for some kind of information on maybe what was happening. Before I got that far, I was distracted by a scream down the hall. I grabbed the flashlight off my desk and I burst into the hall. I was so confused there shouldn't even be anybody in this wing of the hospital. I began to sprint down the hall from where the scream had echoed. As I ran, my mind began to race. What was happening? Was this in any way connected to what those nurses were watching on the computer? A few moments later, I stopped in my tracks. There was a trail of blood in front of me. It led up to the corner where there was a body slumped over. The person in the corner was a male security guard. He had suffered a jugular trauma. You could see a tear in his throat where the blood was pouring out. I've worked here long enough and seen enough horror movies to know that you cannot help somebody in that condition. I did, however, check to see if he was still alive. I had shined my flashlight on his face, and no response. I lightly kicked at his foot to see if it would move, and I got no response. So at this point I started to panic. This wound was fresh, and whatever did this to him was still out there. I made a rash split decision. I was going to head up back to the floor where I had picked up my first body for the night because hanging out here in the dark didn't seem like a safe idea. I made my way through the back hallways to the closest staircase, keeping my guard up in case whoever attacked that security guard was still around and came for me. I had never seen the hospital this dark before and it was really creeping me out. After reaching the staircase, I began to ascend. As I climbed the steps, I got this gut feeling that I should just turn around and leave. After reaching my desired floor, I tried to peer through the small window on the staircase door, but with the power being out, the lighting was very dim. As I quietly opened the door, I had to hold in a gasp. The lady who had ran the front desk, she was laying face down in a pool of blood. But then there was a nurse, standing next to her, chewing on her throat. The nurse stopped eating her makeshift meal and looked up at me. Her eyes shined yellow in the flashlight beam. She bared her teeth at me and growled. She was acting like a wild animal. And without a moment's notice, she had leaped over the desk and she had started charging at me. She lunged into me and knocked me over. I fell back and hit my head. I only had a moment to think about the pain in my head as I felt a sharp pain in my wrist. She bit me. She chomped down on my wrist like it was a goddamn hamburger. Without even thinking, I slammed my flashlight into her forehead. It loosened the grip her teeth had on my wrist, and then I kicked her off of me. I pulled myself up, and I hauled ass down the hall. Bodies of coworkers and patient lie lifeless amongst the hallway. There was so much blood. I didn't have a lot of time to investigate because my friend who had just bitten me was right behind me. The nurse was hot on my trail with a lopsided run. In a panic, I scanned my environment. I noticed an IV pole to my left. I grasped it firmly and prepared to stand my ground. "Stop! Don't come any closer," I proclaimed. The nurse kept shambling towards me. There was a door between us in the hallway that had opened up slowly. A sick and confused patient shuffled out. The patient was an elderly woman who was anywhere between her early to late 80s. She asked if anybody could help her. At that very moment, the nurse turned her attention to the patient instead of me. Her gaze snapped to her like a hungry animal, and with a low grunt, she pounced on the patient. "No!" I shouted in protest, but it was too late. The screams of the elderly woman echoed through the hall, and it was that very scream that brought to life several of the bodies lying around the hall. It was like the dead had risen. This was too weird. This was almost like out of one of those skin biter movies. I took off running as fast as I could, back towards the staircase that I had taken up to this floor. It was all starting to make sense now. All those threads I read online, this outbreak of a mysterious new virus. Then there's the fact that anytime someone died here, we got rid of the body almost immediately. The hazmat suits that Zek Tech wore while picking up said bodies. Zombies, walking corpses, the undead, the reanimation of non-living tissue. Then let's not forget the fact that I was bitten carelessly. I began running. I felt like I was an autopilot. My mind was too busy trying to quell with the fact that I was processing a storm of information. I made it back to where I had first found that security guard earlier in the night. He, or should I say it, was gone, and all that was left instead was a pool of blood. I kept running till I had reached the morgue. I had been trying to decide what the best action was to take next after what had happened on that floor. I decided I was going to use one of the bone saws in the morgue to cut off my right hand. I don't know if it would stop the infection, but it was worth a try. Once I got back to the morgue, I locked myself in. I pulled up my phone and tried to calm down for just a moment. I had a notification for Reddit, thread you might be interested in. I was going to dismiss it until I had saw what the next line was. Zek Tech. After reading the thread, I had found out a few things important. Media outlets around the US are claiming that there's riots breaking out in California. They're claiming these riots are causing fires, looting, power outages, and multiple deaths. ZecTech is a branch of the government that is willing to help clean up the messes caused by the public. A couple locals had commented on the thread claiming they found out what ZecTech stood for. Zombie Exposure Containment Crew. I dropped my phone. I don't know if I was in shock or just couldn't believe what I was reading. Regardless, I had calmed down a bit and time was of the essence. I took my belt off and I looped it around my forearm. I wanted to make a clean cut about 3 inches away from where I had received the bite. I waited a few minutes until my arm had felt like it was on pins and needles from cutting off the blood flow. I rolled up a washcloth and bit down on it, and then I began to carve into my own flesh until I hit the bone. I tied a shred of my lab coat to stop the bleeding over my amputated nub. I had to get out of here. I collected my personal effects. When I heard a rhythmic knock, my blood ran cold. That didn't come from the door. There it was again. That was coming from the freezer. It had to be that girl I picked up earlier tonight. Feeling woozy from blood loss, I attempted to stumble my way to the parking garage. After what felt like an eternity, I finally reached the employee exit doors. I used the last bit of my strength to kick the door open. I was met with a blinding light. A voice amplified by a megaphone shouted at me, Stay where you are, don't move. As my eyes adjusted, I could see there were 2 large trucks in front of me. I could make out the words on the trucks. ZecTech. Several what I assume were men rushed towards me in hazmat suits. They waved this strange radar around my body and it started to beep. After, 2 of them forced me into the back of one of the trucks. And that's where I'm at now. They weren't too bright, as they didn't pat me down or take my phone. I don't know where they're taking me, or what's happening outside. I don't even know if my self-amputation was enough to save me from the virus. I've been feeling dizzy for the past hour, and I think I got a low-grade fever. But I don't know if that's from the loss of blood, or if I'm infected. If anybody reads this thread, tell my family I love them, and I'm sorry. Tell them I'm sorry I left them behind for this nightmare. Another day, another $50, my dude. At least that's what I say when I head to work. My name's Kyle, and I'm one of those pizza dudes. I didn't always used to be a pizza boy. I used to be a server. But ever since that mysterious virus hit, everyone's doing this social distancing thing. And they closed the restaurant. Sadly, because of that, I had to take up a job as a pizza boy. It's not all bad, I'm only, 25. Luckily, a lot of people have been staying home. I mean, not luckily like it's good people are staying home, but because they're staying home, it means they're ordering pizza or other food to their door. In short, it means I can pay my rent. Things have been kind of weird ever since this virus hit. I'm not one of those sheep who follows the media, but they claim people are dying daily from this. Gotten to the point where everyone's wearing masks and stuff now. And there's this pop-up new company that showed up in town. You see their trucks and vans everywhere. They're almost as prominent as all the Amazon vans. ZecTech, whatever that means. Little did I know I was going to find out exactly what that meant. I had an encounter, if you will, with ZecTech firsthand, and it was not chill, my dude. It's a standard Friday. I'm just straight kicking it at Pizzaloni's. That's where I work. An online order's placed. I collect the requested food items, place them in my pizza bag that keeps the heat in, hop in my super steady Chevy Malibu, circa 2011. I slap my Android in the claw suction cup to my dash, pull up the trusted Zooble maps, I punch in the requested address of the pizza purchaser, and I cruise my way on there. Tonight has an off vibe. Half the radio stations are playing emergency broadcasts. So I just keep flipping over to the next one because I need them killer tunes. It's the same thing. You play a good song or two and then all of a sudden the radio goes static and it's rioting and looting here, beware over there. Took a couple shortcuts and back roads to get to my delivery destination, but I upheld the Pizzaloni name. So I've got like 2 minutes left before I hit that 30 minutes or late mark. Well, what do you know, that's just enough time for Kyle to spark a little JJ. Ooh, after 30 seconds of holding that stuff in, I'm feeling toasty. Now that I'm relaxed and nice, I get out of the car and grab my pizza bag. I walk up to the front door and I ring the bell. A solid minute goes by. Wow, not cool, dude. I've dealt with these jerk-offs before. This is the kind of guy that makes you wait until the 30-minute mark's up and tries to get that free pizza through the Pizzaloni's guarantee. Well, I wasn't late, and I wasn't paying for this damn pizza. I balled up my fist and I gave that door 3 solid poundings. I wait. 30 seconds go by. A minute goes by. It's time to pound again. Hello, is anybody here? It's Pizzaloni's. We got that stuffed crust that'll flip your pepperonis. No response. This was seriously not chill. I make a dire decision and I'm gonna head around back and see if maybe they're hanging out there. After making my way through their back gate, I find myself a nice little porch. I knock on the screen door. Hello, is anybody home? Still nothing. I can faintly hear voices though. Ugh, Kyle's guts tells him to turn around and leave, but his pockets cannot afford that. I slowly and cautiously creep onto the porch. The lights are on inside the house as I can see through the sliding glass door they have. There's curtains, but they're pretty see-through. I can make out a TV that's on. 2 recliners in the living room, and I want to say the outline of someone's head in one of the recliners? Well, here we go. Super awkward time, let's get it. After taking a deep breath, I knock on the glass door. Hello, is anyone home? Pizzaloni's with a fresh hot pie. No response. I was going to just turn around, but I know for a fact that some dude was sitting 5 feet away from me in a recliner. I took a deep breath and gathered my resolve. I exhaled and whispered under my breath, no dogs, no dogs, no dogs, no dogs. I'll be real, I don't like dogs. I opened the slider door and announced myself once again, hello, Pizzaloni's. And lo and behold, recliner dude did not respond. I set down my pizza bag on his table. I gave him a light tap on the shoulder. No response. I walked around the recliner so I was face to face with the man. His eyes were closed and there was a single drip of blood running down from his nostril. Oh shit. Either this guy was partying pretty hard, or he was under quarantine for having that new virus. After giving the room a quick glance around, I found a stunning lack of nose candy and rolled up bingies. This guy was under quarantine, it had to be. Shit, and I forgot my face mask in the car. After looking him up and down, I noticed he wasn't breathing. Oh crap, I gotta check and see if he's got a pulse now. Reluctantly, I placed 2 fingers to his jugular. His skin was cold, and there was no pulse. And even though I couldn't feel his heartbeat, I could feel mine in my throat. For a short moment, my senses had vanished. The TV behind me that was blaring zoned out. I could hear a white noise, almost like a frequency. I wanted to run, but I had already entered the house. It almost seemed like I was breaking and entering. Even though I was just trying to deliver my pizza and do my job, I could go to jail if I left this guy. So I pulled out my phone, I dialed the 9, and then the 1 twice. For a few moments I heard it ring, and then I heard it click as someone picked up on the other end. 911, what's your emergency? Hey, okay, so I am a pizza guy who's here to deliver a fresh hot pie from Pizzaloni's. Sir, may I remind you this line is for emergencies only? No, wait, I know that, don't hang up. So, I went and checked on my customer who was supposed to be answering my door. When they didn't answer, I went around back. I entered their home, and I found them dead. So at that point, I didn't know what to do, and I called you. Dead, huh? And you confirmed the death? Yeah, sadly, my dude. He had no pulse, and there was blood dripping from his nostrils. Sir, do you know how long said person has been deceased? No, not really. I mean, it can't have been that long. He ordered a pie like 45 minutes ago. Sir, you said you checked his pulse. Was the body cold? Yeah, it was actually. Sir, I'm going to need the address that you're at, and I'm going to request that you stay where you are, as a specialty unit is on its way. Yeah, 4554 Maple Drive. You can't miss that pimp mobile of a Chevy Malibu with the Pizzaloni's logo in the driveway. Next, I awkwardly called my boss. After I informed my job that this customer not only couldn't pay for the pizza, was no longer of this earthly plane, I waited around for the response unit, and I figured, hey, this dude's dead, and I might as well have a slice. I was mindlessly chopping away as I gazed out the glass door that I had entered from towards the backyard. Well, you know how, like, if glass is clean enough, you can kind of see a reflection in it if the lighting's right? I may have been blazed, but I definitely caught movement in my eye out of the reflection of the glass. As I spun around, I was met with the shock of a lifetime. This dude was standing up, and he looked pissed as hell. Hey now, bro amigo, this isn't what it looks like. No response. He looked like he was teeming with rage, and something was off about him. His eyes were an unnatural color. They were this sunshine yellow. Sir, I'm not breaking and entering, I promise. I was here to bring you your dinner. He tilted his neck to the side like a confused animal. And like, you weren't answering, so I came around back and I saw you and you still weren't answering, so then I came in and checked on you and you were Before I could finish my sentence, he opened his mouth. A disgusting, slimy texture of what looked like bile, blood clots, and possibly some of his tongue fell onto the floor. He let out an angry roar like a berserk beast. It gave me goosebumps, and I pressed myself against the glass door. He started coming at me. At first it was a shamble, but it picked up into a lopsided run. I ran around to the other side of the table. If you were on looking from afar, it looked like we were playing one of those games a 3-year-old does. If you were in my point of view, you've got some rabid, creepy old man who wants to do something to you which could be murder. Instead of trying to pick a side of the table to corner me on, he leapt right across it. I hurried towards the recliner where I had found him. There was a coffee table between the recliners and had a vase of flowers in it. I picked that shit up, and when he came closer to me, I gave him the Kyle crush and smashed it on his head. And it put him down, or at least I thought it did. I didn't want to be in this house any longer, and I went to exit through the front door. As I opened the front door, I felt a tug on the leg of my jeans. This crazy bastard was clinging to me and trying to chomp my ankle. I used my free foot to kick him off. While this was happening, I saw headlights roll across us as someone pulled into the driveway. I want to say I heard like 4 car door slams as I was busy fighting this guy off my ankle. A blinding light was shown on my face, followed by the booming voice of a megaphone.
Sir, we request you stop what you're doing and refrain from leaving the property.
Yeah, sure bro dudes, except I got this guy trying to make a human hamburger out of my ankle. Just like that, I saw somebody run across the yard to the side of the house. As I held onto the door frame and fought off my not-so-dead customer, I want to say 15 seconds passed before I heard the shatter of glass from behind me. 2 people in riot gear attempted to apprehend the guy who was trying to eat my ankle. Somebody in riot gear approached me and told me I needed to come with them. I protested and explained I was still on the clock and I had to finish my shift, my dude. I was told everything would be handled. I had the Zec Tech guarantee, but I needed to get in the back of their van right now. The van I was forced into was very futuristic looking from the inside. It had multiple sections that were cut off by plexiglass. These sections were just big enough to barely sit in. I was forced into one, and after a few moments later, they brought my friend who was trying to make a snack out of me and put him in another one. Although this time he looked more like when I first found him. Lifeless. Once they all piled back in the van, I attempted to ask multiple questions. My mind was racing. Okay, so 1, what the hell was that? 2, who the hell are you? And 3, why are you bringing Captain Chompy-Lop? One of the people in the riot gear looked at me and just held their finger up to their mouth, insinuating I should be quiet. 25 minutes or so went by on this really uncomfortable ride. When we did finally stop, I was forced off the van and then they blindfolded me. I was forced to walk for, I don't know, probably another 10 minutes, where I was finally dumped off in some small metal room that only had 2 chairs and a metal table in the center. I was left alone for about 25 minutes or so, and I was not getting any service whatsoever. While playing on my phone, suddenly the door flew open. A man in the same riot gear as I had seen before. He didn't look as jacked as the other guys, or girls. I don't want to come off as sexist. A man in the gear approached the table with a clipboard in his hand. He sat down at the table, and he announced himself. Why, hello there, Kyle. I'm Agent Z13. Whoa, Marcel, how do you know my name? Why, Kyle, we know everything about you. We know that you were in the wrong place at the wrong time, that's for sure. What are you talking about, dude? I was doing my job. I'm talking about the fact that you got rustled up in our work with one of them there skin biters. Skin what? Wait, is that why he was trying to chomp me? Why indeed, young man. Those who are unfortunate enough to die from this new virus sometimes don't stay dead. What? Now, I understand that is a lot to process, but I promise you, this is true. Now you see, young Kyle, we have a problem here, as you saw something you should not have seen. So, what are we gonna do about that? Well, son, the way I see it, you got 2 options. You either walk out of here, or you don't. Wait, like, I can just leave? Well, now that depends. Solely on your decisions you make next. Alright, G-Man, hit me with it. What do I gotta do? If you choose freedom, which is your choice solely, you will be signing these papers I have in my hand. These papers justify that if for any reason you talk about the events that you had witnessed this evening with anybody, your actions will be held as treason to your country, and you will be deemed as a terrorist. And I'm sure you know what the government does to terrorists, especially on U.S. soil. I understand, my dude. My silence is my freedom, and I'll never speak on it again. There's more to it, though. We need to make sure you're not around people for a while, as you will need to be quarantined since you were around one of the subjects. If you do choose said quarantine, we will be reaching out to your former place of employment and explaining as to why you will not be returning. Wait, former? Did they fire me?
No, son, we'll be quitting the job for you at this point.
Dude, I can't. I have rent.
At which place you will be starting your mandatory quarantine in your own home environment, and we will be sending you a monthly check to cover all expenses needed upon living. Wait a minute, let me get this straight. I keep my mouth shut, and I get paid, and I don't gotta deliver pizzas for pizzalones no more? Hell yeah, G-Man, let me sign that right now.
That was a month ago. I kinda miss people. This social distancing thing isn't really that fun.
At least I'm getting paid for this whole endeavor. Every now and again, though, with the money I'm making from this government check, I do order myself some pizzalones, and I see the boys. We chat for a few moments after I leave them a nice fat tip, and I go back to eating pizza and gaming. As for what Zectec's doing with those zombies, beats me. I'm no guessing man, but if I had to bet, it probably has something to do with their name, as Z stands for zombie. Who cares? When this whole thing blows over, I'm gonna release a book on the entire thing. You know, unless, like, the whole world ends and the apocalypse strikes. Yeah, right, like something like that could ever happen in sunny California.
Well, it looks as if you've survived to the end of this video. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to listen to these scary tales I've written myself. If you did enjoy, maybe consider leaving a like and subscribing. There's more spooky content just around the corner. Remember, dear viewer, you never know what goes bump in the night.